Did she just yell at a police chief? In first class? On his wife's airline. The plane to New York had barely begun boarding when the tension started brewing. Detective Chief Darnell Hayes, 56 years old, stood quietly at gate 11B, reviewing the final pages of a legal brief on his tablet. Darnell was a man of few words, but many medals. 30 years in the NYPD, countless citations for valor, and a reputation as the man who could walk into chaos and walk out with order. Yet, even now, on his way to a long-overdue vacation with his wife, he couldn't quite take off the badge in his mind. When they called for first-class boarding, Darnell slipped his tablet into his leather satchel, straightened his blazer, and strolled onto the jet bridge. The cabin door opened, and the scent of leather seats and coffee filled the air. He nodded politely at the flight attendants and moved confidently to seat 4C. He placed his satchel in the overhead bin, carefully closed it, and lowered himself into the seat. Across the aisle, a few passengers glanced his way, some with polite curiosity, others with a subtle edge of judgment. A black man in first class, traveling alone. It never failed to provoke glances. That's when Samantha, a young flight attendant with flawless makeup and a tightly pinned blonde bun, made her appearance. She walked briskly through the cabin, scanning for anything out of place. Her eyes landed on Darnell, her steps slowed. Her brows creased slightly. She leaned in with a tight-lipped smile. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass, please?" Darnell looked up, surprised but composed. Of course. He unlocked his phone, pulled up the digital ticket, and held it up. Her eyes scanned it briefly. "Seat 4C," she mumbled, unconvinced. "This is first class, sir." "I'm aware." She hesitated. "We've had some errors today. Passengers taking seats they didn't purchase." Darnell raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem?" Before she answered, she looked around, as if hoping someone else had noticed. A few passengers now watched openly. "I'll just verify with the gate," she said curtly and walked off without another word. Darnell exhaled slowly, leaned back in his seat, and looked out the window. He had faced far worse in life. Shootouts, courtroom crossfires, internal affairs investigations. But somehow, subtle moments like this still stung. The casual doubt, the assumption. Minutes passed. Samantha returned, expression unchanged. "I need to see your ID," she said flatly. He turned to her, now irritated but steady. "You saw my boarding pass. I need government-issued ID to confirm it matches the name." Slowly, he reached into his wallet, pulled out a leather badge holder, and flipped it open. "Detective Chief Darnell Hayes, NYPD." Her mouth opened slightly, but no apology followed. Only a rigid nod. "Okay," she muttered. "Thank you." Darnell closed the badge wallet and tucked it away. Before Samantha could leave, a voice rang from the galley. "Samantha?" It was Linda, the lead flight attendant. Older, seasoned, and with a presence that commanded attention. "Yes?" Samantha turned. Linda looked over. Then her eyes widened. "Detective Hayes, I didn't know you were flying with us again." Darnell smiled faintly. "Hello, Linda. Good to see you." She walked over and extended a hand warmly. "Always a pleasure to have you on board. Everything okay?" Before Darnell could answer, Linda looked at Samantha, whose face was now beginning to show signs of panic. "Didn't you recognize him?" Linda asked. Samantha blinked. He didn't mention. He's flown with us many times." Linda interrupted, voice clipped. "And he's part of our loyalty circle. Please make sure he's comfortable." "Yes, of course," Samantha said quickly, then turned and walked briskly to the back of the cabin. Linda leaned in. "Sorry about that, sir. She's still new." "No harm done," Darnell said calmly. But the line in his jaw said otherwise. Still, this was only the beginning. Just as the pre-boarding announcements began, the PA system crackled to life, and the captain's voice came on. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard SkyNova Flight 314. We'd like to take a moment to welcome a special guest flying with us today. Our company's new chairwoman, Mrs. Monica Langston, who's traveling in Seat 1A. Please give her a warm welcome." Heads turned. Samantha, standing near the curtain separating first class, perked up at the name. Monica Langston. The Monica Langston, the newly appointed chairwoman of SkyNova, known for her bold leadership and fierce stance against corporate discrimination. She was a legend in the industry, the first black woman to head a major U.S. airline. Samantha peeked through the curtain toward the front. There she was, elegant, confident, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and reading a newspaper. Then Monica looked up, right at Darnell. Her face broke into a warm smile. She stood up and walked directly toward him. "Baby," she said. "You made it." The cabin fell silent. Darnell stood. "Wouldn't miss it." They embraced. Monica turned to Linda. "Thank you for taking care of him." Linda nodded graciously. Then Monica looked over to Samantha, who had gone pale. "Everything all right, Ms.?" Samantha stammered. "Yes, chairwoman. Everything's fine." Monica's expression didn't change. "Really? I'll ask Darnell later if he agrees." Samantha swallowed hard. By the time the plane took off, Samantha had retreated to the galley, visibly shaken. The crew whispered. The passengers exchanged glances, and Darnell? He just sat back in seat 4C, sipped his ginger ale, and smiled slightly. Justice, sometimes, was quiet. The aircraft had reached cruising altitude. Seatbelt signs dimmed. Passengers opened books, plugged in headphones, and ordered drinks. But in the first-class cabin, the air remained tight, like everyone was still holding their breath from what had just happened. Flight attendant Samantha stood stiffly in the galley, nervously adjusting the tight bun at the back of her head. Her hands trembled slightly as she straightened napkins for the drink cart, her mind racing. She didn't expect that man, that black man, to be a high-ranking police officer. And she definitely hadn't expected him to be married to Monica Langston, the new chairwoman of Skynova Airlines. The very airline whose employee code of conduct Samantha had clearly violated in public within the first 15 minutes of the flight. Samantha had made a career out of control, keeping order, maintaining poise. But now, her cheeks burned with humiliation and beads of sweat formed beneath her collar. Meanwhile, in seat 4C, Detective Chief Darnell Hayes leaned back quietly, pretending to read a newspaper. But his eyes weren't moving. He was thinking about how often people made assumptions, about how often someone like him, accomplished, decorated, responsible, was still seen as an outsider, or worse, a threat. That he wasn't angry anymore. No, something deeper than anger had settled in, a sharp, cold clarity, the kind he'd learned to trust on the job. Across the aisle, passengers whispered. "Did you hear what she said to him? She asked for his ID. He's a police chief, and her wife owns the airline. That girl's done." Then came the soft click of heels. The cabin hushed. Monica Langston, graceful as ever, walked from seat 1 down the aisle. Every head turned. She was the kind of woman people looked up to, not just because she was in charge, but because she carried power without ever needing to raise her voice. She stopped at row 4 and looked down at her husband. "May I join you?" she asked with a smile. "Of course," Darnell replied, moving his newspaper aside. She sat in the empty seat beside him, for D, and gently touched his hand. "I heard what happened," she said softly. "I handled it," he replied. "I know you did. But I want you to know, I'm not just going to sit in that chair up front and let this slide." Darnell gave her a sidelong glance. "You're not mad." "Oh, I'm furious," she said, the edge returning to her voice. "But not surprised. And that's the part that hurts." Just then, Linda, the senior flight attendant, approached with a warm smile and a tray of drinks. "Chairwoman Langston, Chief Hayes," she greeted them respectfully. "Can I offer you something to drink?" "We're fine, thank you," Monica said, then glanced toward the galley. "But I'd like to speak with your colleague, Samantha." Linda's smile faltered. "Of course, I'll ask her to come speak with you." Seconds later, Samantha emerged, stiff, pale, visibly shaken. She approached with trembling hands clasped in front of her. "You wanted to speak with me, ma'am?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Monica didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "What's your employee number, Samantha?" Samantha blinked. "Excuse me." "Your employee number," Monica repeated calmly. "We'll be reviewing your behavior upon landing. Not just the incident with my husband, but the entire way you presented yourself to a passenger. A passenger you judged before asking a single question." Samantha opened her mouth to defend herself, but nothing came out. Monica continued. "You represent Skynova Airlines. That means your behavior isn't just your own. It reflects on all of us. I built this company on inclusion, trust, and decency. You showed none of that." Samantha's lower lip quivered. I didn't know he was your husband." "That's the point," Monica replied sharply. "You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect." That silence again, thick, unforgiving. Go back to the galley, Monica said firmly. Samantha turned and walked away, fighting back tears. Her career, or what was left of it, hung in the balance. Monica turned back to Darnell. I tried so hard to build a company that treats people fairly. You did, he said gently. But people bring their biases with them. She looked around the cabin. They were all watching. He nodded. That's good. Let them learn something today. Meanwhile, in row 5, a young woman in a hoodie quietly pulled out her phone. She had recorded part of the exchange, the shouting, the confrontation, the reveal. She looked at the screen. 1 minute 36 seconds. Perfect. She uploaded it with a simple caption. Flight attendant yells at black man in first class, not knowing who he really is. Flushed face. Within minutes, the video was being shared on every platform. By the time the plane landed in New York, hashtags were trending. Hashtag Skynova scandal, hashtag Darnell Hayes, hashtag Monica Langston power move, hashtag first class bias. Monica's phone buzzed with PR alerts. News outlets were already requesting statements to eye in the back galley. Samantha sat on a jump seat. Numb. She hadn't just yelled at a passenger. She'd humiliated herself. On camera. Before millions. And worse, before a woman who believed in change and had the power to make it happen. The flight touched down at JFK Airport just past 6 p.m. The usual sounds of seat belts unclicking, overhead bins snapping open, and passengers murmuring filled the cabin. But there was also a palpable undercurrent, a tension that hadn't dissipated since the moment the confrontation happened. Flight attendant Samantha stood stiffly at the front, trying to maintain composure. Her smile was mechanical, her movements rehearsed. But her mind was a whirlwind of panic, she knew. She knew that video was already online. She had seen the young woman in row 5, the one with the hoodie, the AirPods, and the calm, calculating expression. She'd caught her glancing up, angling her phone. And now, as Samantha discreetly checked her own phone behind the beverage cart curtain, the full weight of it hit her. 1.2 million views in 3 hours. Flight attendant Assyria MS at Black Police Chief gets destroyed by airline owner. Monica Langston puts racist employee on blast. Raised fist. Medium dark skin tone fire. Her face went pale. Each headline felt like a dagger. Each share, each comment, each retweet, a nail in the coffin of her career. Meanwhile, Detective Darnell Hayes and his wife Monica Langston exited the plane calmly, escorted by airport staff who were already alerted about their presence. There were no press at the gate yet, but word had already reached Skynova's executive team before the wheels even touched the ground. As they entered the terminal, Monica's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and sighed. PR team, she said. Time to handle the storm. She picked up. Yes, Liza. I saw the video. No, we're not going to issue a generic apology. This is not a generic incident. She paused, then added, draft a statement. We'll release it tonight. I want it personal. I want it powerful. Darnell walked beside her silently, watching the travelers rush past, oblivious to the firestorm they had just left behind. He had always hated the spotlight. He didn't want to be a story, but now there was no avoiding it. Are you sure you want to be this public? He asked. Monica didn't hesitate. Yes, if we stay silent, it normalizes what she did. She was afraid, Darnell said, more thoughtful than defensive. Not of me, personally. Of the idea of me. Of a black man in a first-class seat. Monica nodded slowly. Which is exactly why we have to speak. That night, Monica's statement was posted to every Skynova social media account, the company website, and was sent to every major news outlet. It read, Statement from Chairwoman Monica Langston yesterday, on Flight 314, my husband, Detective Chief Darnell Hayes, was the target of a prejudiced and humiliating interaction by one of our flight attendants. This is personal to me not just because he is my husband, but because every passenger deserves dignity, regardless of how they look. That Skynova does not and will not tolerate discrimination in any form. The employee involved has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full review. Our mission is to take every passenger higher. In the air and in how we treat each other. Monica Langston, it went viral within minutes. News anchors debated it on live television. Activists praised the directness of her words. And thousands of users flooded Skynova's pages with both outrage and support. But back at Samantha's apartment, it was pure silence. broken only by the hum of her refrigerator and the buzz of her phone, which she no longer had the courage to look at. She had just gotten home after a long debriefing at headquarters. HR had been polite, but cold. The kind of tone that tells you they're just collecting the last puzzle pieces before they make it official. Her agent at the union hadn't returned her calls. Her group chats were silent, and in her inbox sat over a dozen requests from journalists. She didn't even click them open. She just sat there, alone on her sofa, her uniform jacket still on. How did it go this far? She whispered aloud to I in her mind. It had been a simple misunderstanding. But deep down, she knew better. She had judged him the moment she saw him, and she had acted not out of policy, but out of presumption. Elsewhere in the city, Darnell and Monica sat quietly on their balcony, sipping tea. Neither of them was talking, but both were thinking about the same thing. What would happen next? Do you think she'll get fired? Monica asked eventually. I don't know, Darnell replied. What I hope is that she learns something. That everyone watching learns something. Monica nodded. I've spent years trying to fix this industry from the inside. But it takes moments like this to shake people. Darnell set his cup down. You shook them today. With grace. You stood with more grace, she replied, smiling. You could have shouted back. You didn't. He looked at her. I knew you'd handle it. She reached out and took his hand. And for the first time that day, they both exhaled, not just the breath of relief, but the breath of change. 3 days after the viral incident, Samantha Lewis walked into Skynova's corporate headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, her heels clicking nervously on the polished marble floors. She had barely slept, her stomach was in knots, and her inbox was still overflowing with public backlash. The receptionist at the front desk gave her a stiff nod and said, You can head up to floor 27. HR is waiting. Floor 27, but she had never been to floor 27 before. That floor was reserved for executive offices, the inner sanctum of the company. Only top-level staff, VPs, and board members belonged there. But today, she was being summoned. The elevator doors opened to a hushed, modern lobby with glass walls and abstract artwork. It smelled of leather, professionalism, and judgment that a woman from HR, neat bob haircut, tablet in hand, gestured silently for Samantha to follow. As they walked, Samantha couldn't help but feel the weight of her own choices pressing down on her chest. What had started as a moment of perceived authority at 35,000 feet had become an international lesson in accountability. They entered a quiet meeting room. A long table. 7 people, all watching her. Among them, Skynova's general counsel, the head of human resources, the director of in-flight services, and at the far end of the table, Monica Langston herself, chairwoman, powerhouse, and the wife of the man Samantha had shouted at. Samantha's throat tightened. Please sit, Monica said evenly. Samantha took the chair at the center, every pair of eyes tracking her movement. A pause. Then Monica spoke. You've been with Skynova for 6 years, she began. According to your record, no major incidents until now. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am, Samantha said softly. Walk me through what happened on Flight 314. From your perspective. No filters. Samantha inhaled shakily. I saw a man sitting in first class. He looked out of place. I mean, he wasn't dressed like most passengers up there. I assumed he might have boarded incorrectly. So you asked for his boarding pass, Monica clarified. Yes. And then his ID. And I think I raised my voice. I made an assumption, and I acted unprofessionally. I wasn't trying to be racist. I swear I wasn't. Monica leaned forward slightly. Intent matters. But so does impact. Samantha nodded quickly. I know. I've been reading every comment online. Every message. I've even had people find my personal social media and threaten me. I made a huge mistake. I never meant for it to turn into all this. The legal officer chimed in. Do you dispute any part of the recorded incident as seen on social media? No, sir. Another executive asked. If you were placed back on a flight tomorrow, what would you do differently? Samantha hesitated. Everything, she said, her voice breaking. I wouldn't judge someone based on their appearance. I wouldn't jump to conclusions. I'd lead with kindness and assume the best, not the worst. Silence followed. Then Monica spoke again. You embarrassed my husband. You embarrassed our company. But more importantly, you embarrassed yourself, and you damaged trust between our airline and our passengers. Tears welled in Samantha's eyes. I understand. Monica took a breath. I didn't call you here today to humiliate you further. I called you here to look you in the eye and ask you, are you really ready to take responsibility for this? Or are you just afraid of losing your job? That hit hard. Samantha wiped her face. I'm ready to take responsibility. I just don't know how to fix it. Another long pause. Then Monica stood up and walked to the window. She stared out at the skyline for a moment. Then she turned back. Effective immediately, you are placed on a 6-month unpaid suspension, she said. You will complete a corporate-led diversity and bias reduction program, as well as a mentorship rotation with our community outreach division. If you choose to return, it will be in a different role with no direct customer interaction until further notice. Samantha nodded quickly, relief mixing with shame. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for giving me that chance. Monica's eyes softened slightly. I believe in second chances, but you only get one. That evening, Monica returned home to Darnell, who was working quietly at the dining table. How'd it go? He asked, not looking up. She cried. Monica said flatly. Darnell nodded once. You fired her? No, she replied. Not yet. I gave her a path. A hard one. But it's there. He closed his laptop. She deserves it? Monica tilted her head. She deserves the opportunity to become better. What she deserves will depend on what she chooses to do next. Darnell walked over and wrapped his arms around her. Still the wisest woman I know, he whispered. I learned from the best, she replied. They stood there, wrapped in the kind of silence that spoke of respect, resilience, and the unshakable belief that justice, when guided by wisdom, could heal more than it punished. 1 week later, at a private press event hosted by Skynova Airlines, the room buzzed with quiet tension. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters from CNN, NBC, and even smaller social channels had shown up in droves. The public statement from chairwoman Monica Langston had generated millions of views. But what people didn't expect, what made this event go viral before it even started, was the announcement that Samantha Lewis, the flight attendant at the center of the controversy, would be making a formal public apology. It was rare, and it was intentional. Monica stood at the podium first, looking calm and composed as always. She spoke clearly. Accountability is not about punishment. It's about transformation. Samantha Lewis has asked to speak today, not on behalf of the company, but as herself, as a person who made a public mistake and wants to own it publicly. Then she stepped aside. A hush fell over the room. Samantha stepped up. She wasn't wearing a Skynova uniform. She wore a simple navy dress. Her hair was tied back neatly, but not tightly, and her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the sides of the podium. Behind her, projected on the screen, was an image of Detective Chief Darnell Hayes, stoic, respectful, calm. A still from the viral video. Samantha took a breath. On Flight 314, she began, I made a decision based on bias. I saw a man, a black man, sitting in first class, and I assumed he didn't belong there. I didn't ask questions. I didn't show kindness. I confronted him with suspicion instead of respect. The room stayed silent. I've worked in aviation for 6 years. I've been trained in customer service, in policy, in safety. But no amount of training matters if I ignore what's in my heart. She paused. I humiliated a man who had done nothing wrong. A man who not only had every right to be in that seat, but who had given his life to protecting people like me. And the worst part is, I didn't recognize who he was until I realized who he was married to. And that truth alone shows how far I still have to go. Cameras clicked. Samantha looked down for a moment, then back up. I want to publicly apologize to Detective Chief Darnell Hayes, to Chairwoman Monica Langston, to every black passenger who's ever been treated like they didn't belong. I can't erase what I did, but I can face it. At the edge of the stage, a figure stood. Darnell Hayes. He had come quietly, without announcement, sitting in the front row beside Monica. Now, he slowly walked up the steps. As Samantha stepped back from the mic, she turned to him, eyes full of remorse. I'm so sorry, she said, voice trembling. Not because I got caught, but because I finally see. Darnell didn't say anything right away. He just looked at her, not with anger, not with pride, but with the kind of gravity only earned through years of choosing patience over rage. Then he stepped forward. Thank you for apologizing, he said. It takes strength to do that, and it takes even more to change. I hope you mean every word. I do, she whispered. He nodded. Then start proving it. That moment was shared millions of times across platforms. Some praised Samantha's bravery for owning up to her mistake. Others criticized her, saying it was too little, too late. But one thing was clear. No one could say she ran from what she did. Weeks later, Samantha began her community rotation at Skynova's diversity outreach program. She helped lead workshops with new flight crews, not from a place of superiority, but humility. She shared her story. She showed the video. She let her shame be a mirror for others to examine their own assumptions, and she never once referred to herself as a victim. Meanwhile, Monica and Darnell went on with their lives, their faces, names, and voices still trending in news cycles, but never losing their quiet center. Monica sat down for a CNN interview 2 months later, where the host asked, "Do you think people like Samantha should be forgiven?" She replied, "We shouldn't confuse forgiveness with forgetting. What matters is what she does next. Real growth takes time, but I believe in it." The host smiled. "That's very generous." Monica looked straight into the camera. "It's not generosity. It's leadership." And Darnell? He went back to work, mentoring young officers, speaking at civic events, walking communities with dignity and presence. But he never forgot that flight. He never forgot how the world looked at him after the story came out. And he never forgot the look on Samantha's face when she realized the truth. Not all power wears a uniform. And not all justice comes from anger. Sometimes it just walks quietly and forgives.